Hi, Macedonia. Welcome back to our Wednesday study. It's good to see you all again. It was wonderful to see everyone in church on Sunday, and hopefully we'll be able to continue that with the rise in cases coming up around the virus locally. Everybody stay safe and wash your hands, do all that fun stuff because with it increasing, we don't want to risk getting out of hand and locking back down again. So we're just hopeful that we'll be able to continue meeting face to face and expand our services again, get back to what will be the new normal, because I don't think it's ever going to be quite the same again, particularly as everybody's going to be super sensitive going forward to some of this stuff. So, but it is good to see everyone, and thank you for dialing in. How do you say that? Tuning in. There we go. Broadcasting, so I guess you'd be tuning in for our study of James. Short lesson per se this week, short scriptures, but you're going to get a bonus because we're also going to look at Matthew in the Beatitudes and in the Sermon on the Mount for some additional context here in the scripture. So we're going to be in James chapter 3. I'm going to be looking at verses 13 through 18 tonight. And we will also be over in Matthew chapter 5, verses 3 through 11 as the companion there. And mostly focusing on the last few verses, but we're going to read it all for context. So it's we're going to focus on wisdom, but I want to get real specific about peacemaking, because that is, I think, very appropriate and timely for the world that we're in right now and with what's going on. We thought the virus was crazy. I really got to say that I think things have gotten far more out of hand in the U.S. with the rioting and protests than with the virus, just from my perspective. And I'm plugged in and connected in, with things going on all across the U.S. Because of the company I work for. And so I see a lot of things in a bit of a different way. And I don't necessarily disagree with what the need is and the issue that's out there, but I certainly disagree with the way it's being handled when people deal with it through violence and think that violence will solve the problem. It's not going to make things better. And I want to kind of dial in on that about being a peacemaker and what that looks like. It's something that we hear about, and I think it kind of goes in one ear and we chew on it a little bit, but it doesn't really settle in as to what as Christians we're supposed to do. And so we get into these situations and we find that we are not as equipped as we should be to deal with difficult situations. And in my experience, unless your personality is geared toward conflict or being a good conflict management person, we tend to run from it. We tend to think that meek means that we don't stand up and we don't stand our ground. And then oftentimes as Christians, we will find that we end up standing our ground for either the wrong reasons or on the wrong topics. And we got to be careful where we plant our flag, because the only safe place is Jesus in the Bible, and that's where we need to base everything that we do and say. And if you can't back up what you're taking a position on through biblical context, then you need to be very careful about what you're saying. And this is something that I've begun to examine in myself, and I absolutely encourage everyone to do that. If you can't find a biblical basis for it, then you are getting on shifting sand, I think. And again, I'm sharing my perspective here. I would love to have a conversation with somebody if you disagree with me on that, and understand your perspective on it. This is what needs to happen more of, I think, among Christians and between Christians and non-Christians, is just open dialogue and understanding and discussion. I can have a great relationship and be perfectly cordial to someone and disagree fundamentally with what they believe. I work with people all the time who we disagree on a number of things, but can work together very well. So just a few thoughts there. And I think all of that, in my perspective, it's backed up by Scripture. I think we could take all of that and look at Jesus, look at how he operated the disciples, and in Scripture we can find this is true. And so that's what we're going to get into. So a little bit long opening monologue there. I apologize for that. But let's jump in James chapter 3, verse 13 through 18. Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere, and a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. Wow, it's just in those verses there's so much that we can learn and apply. And as I read it, I feel the sense of it coming out. So much of what we deal with, or what you watch the news. I mean, how much do you see, that jealousy and selfish ambition, I was looking for the words here on my screen, for where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder in every vile practice. How much disorder and vile practice can you find? Carefully, because how much disorder and vile practices can we find in our own lives? We don't have to look very far. And keep in mind that we're judging this by God's standard, not ours. So what you think is a vile practice and what God thinks of as a vile practice may be very different. So we need to be really cautious there and examine ourselves first before we start looking around. Scripture again, don't look at the mote in your brother's eye without first removing the plank from your own. I've lived that very well. And I don't mean well as in done a great job of it. I walk around with planks sticking out of my head and trying to examine the faults of others all the time. And it is a practice that I continually work at to try to improve my own ability to examine myself first. Because if I'm going to approach someone in love, I want to be able to have examined myself to understand where I am at with it. And, when you think of jealousy and selfish ambition, what so much drives sin, everything in our lives, it's self. Jealousy, selfish ambition. And these are all about ourself. When you look at all of the struggles and trials and things that go on in life, how many of them are driven by selfishness, by someone being selfish? And again, we see this in ourselves. And the idea that the things that are happening, the good things, and we have this happening. There are good things about people protesting for equality and safety and fair treatment and all of those things. When people get involved who have selfish motives, things get corrupted, and this is where it starts to go wrong. And we see it in the church. Churches have split over selfish motives. Somebody wants it their way, and they're bound and determined to get it, and they are willing to sacrifice the church, meaning the congregation in total, in order to get it. And we can all be in that position and do that if we're not careful, and believe absolutely the whole time that we are right, which is where the self-righteousness comes in. And he says, and in contrast here, wisdom from above, and he gives some examples: pure, peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. If you and I have a disagreement, and it can be about anything, this could be about sports, it could be about politics, it could be about religion, fundamental aspects of the faith. If we have a disagreement about something, and we can't sit down and have a conversation, we may never agree. I may never change your mind, you may never change mine, but if we can have a open, healthy dialogue about it and talk and understand each other's perspective, and I may understand why you feel that way, or believe the way you do. You may understand that with me. It doesn't change my mind. I still believe you're wrong, but we can have a good relationship regardless. It doesn't mean that I'm going to trust your advice when it comes to my political whatever, or my sports or religion, whatever it is, if I disagree with you. But to be able to have that conversation in a healthy way, that shows more my ability to have an open dialogue with you in a healthy way and be constructive and loving toward you no matter how I disagree with you, says more than all my words. I may convert you by my actions rather than my words, and I would put forth that happens more often than not. If you are witnessing to believers or to unbelievers, you will convert more of them by your actions than you will by your words that you speak. People are watching us all the time, and you don't know how many seeds you have sown, good and bad, that have either helped people come toward God or moved them away from God. In the last verse, a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. And with that verse, I want to jump over to Matthew chapter 5, and I'm going to read these verses here, 3 through 11, and these are the blessed R's that you're familiar with. But blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. And I would tell you that I think if you are identified with the first of these verses, the last of the verses are going to apply. Poor in spirit, mourn, meek, hunger and thirst for righteousness. Meaning you're seeking after righteousness. You're merciful. You're pure in heart. You're peacemaker. I think if you strive after those things, if you humble yourself and follow God obediently, then you're going to experience verses 10 and 11. You're persecuted for righteousness' sake, reviled and persecuted. Blessed are those when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. We see this happen all around us in the world. If you are an honest person, someone is going to come along to try to tear you down. And as we read in James, often because of selfish motives. Sometimes it's obvious selfish motives. Sometimes we don't know why people do things. Sometimes they don't know why they say the things they do. Have you ever lashed out at someone and then looked back and thought, I don't know why I acted that way. I don't know why I responded. And it takes time to understand and process what was going on inside of you, that you were angry and frustrated and all those things. And that person, they were the straw that broke the camel's back. And they were the ones that received your explosive anger at that moment. It wasn't them. It wasn't anything they did. And you have to go apologize. But you can, we've all experienced that. But we also know that good people, when they are trying to do good, will garner the ire and the persecution of Satan. And it says in James that it's in those last verses that it is these things that have come against us are demonic. We are fighting a battle against spiritual forces. Whether you adhere to that closely or not, there is spiritual warfare going on all around us. We read about it in the Bible, and we live it. And we are called to be peacemakers. Just real quick and kind of in a way to wrap up here, I got to thinking about this idea of being a peacemaker, and I've heard this described before, and I want to be clear, there's a difference between being a peacemaker and a peacekeeper. In my home, and I'm sure no one is surprised by this, there are times when our children are not peaceful. They are at conflict, they are having words with one another, they might be fighting, chasing, whatever. It can get loud. And as as I listen consciously or unconsciously, sometimes I don't even realize it's happening, I feel the tension rising up, and I feel, why am I so angry? Why am I so irritated right now? And I realize it's because there's all of this noise and chaos and fighting going on. And suddenly I become a peacemaker, or sorry, a peacekeeper, because we are going to keep the peace. And the irony is, and I got this thinking about this, that I hear peacekeepers. When you hear peacekeepers, you think of, or I think of the UN peacekeeping force. But the funny thing is the inherent principle of a UN peacekeeping force is that they go in with guns and force the peace on people that are in conflict. And so when my children are in conflict, I will keep the peace by enforcing peace upon them. I will send them to their rooms. I'll separate them. I will, tell them to, stop yelling at each other, be kind, whatever. I am less interested in teaching them a life lesson than just getting things to be peaceful. That's a peacekeeper. We do this all the time in our lives. What's a peacemaker? A peacemaker is what we're called to. We are called to be peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Jesus was a peacemaker, son of God, peacemaker. That's what he was. He brought peace. He didn't come to conquer through war or with weapons. He came to bring peace, and he did it through reconciling the differences. He reconciled us to God through his own blood and made peace between us and God. In our lives, we can be peacemakers. We can reconcile ourselves to others. And again, look at ourselves first. Where do we have conflict? Who can we be reconciled to? It could be family, our spouse, our children, our parents, wherever that is. But we can make peace. We can make peace between others. We can help others understand one another better and gain empathy for one another so that they can be at peace, even if they disagree. Peacemaking, peace doesn't mean that we all agree about everything. We can disagree adamantly, but we can do it in a peaceful way and respectfully and sincerely. And again, that will testify more to the spirit within us than anything else. And that is what it means to be a peacemaker, and what we're called both by Jesus, and then James reiterates in his chapter 3 there at the end, that if you want to live the life that God has called you to live, focus on peace. Being a peace, it doesn't mean run from conflict. Sometimes we have to run into the conflict to help make peace. But this is what we're called to as believers, as children of God, and as brothers and sisters of Christ. This is the goal that we have, and the role that we have as we evangelize and spread the good news. It's a good news of peace and salvation, and that's what we should be doing. So hope you all enjoyed the lesson. Feel free to contact me if you have questions. Again, happy to have a peaceful discussion about this with anyone, and I will see you Sunday.